We really have to get away from the scale as a metric of success.
Absolutely.
Because as long as we are using a scale and we aren't using body composition, we'll be forever, challenged by this whole thing.
When you get strong, you will also lose weight. You will also have a better body composition, and you'll have all the benefits you're looking for with being skinny
Right.
without having the metabolic disease aspect of being skinny
And without having to try to maintain your weight. When you put on muscle, your metabolism's so great, you don't have to worry about it.
Right.
It's a non-issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that your metabolism lives in your muscle. Like, we think it's somewhere else. JJ, thank you so much for joining the Extend podcast. It's so incredible to have you here. It's been so
Yay.
great getting to know you and everything you stand for. It's just awesome.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. I don't know where you've been all my life.
I know, right? I feel the same way. But I want to start off with, just for the audience to get to know you a little bit, what do you consider yourself a true expert as? What do you love to speak about? What are you passionate about?
I have always been obsessed with fitness and nutrition. I mean, since little kid. So, and I got to tell you, I'm more excited about the field now than ever, and especially the exercise science piece of things. So that would be what I'd talk about all day, all night, if left to my own devices.
I totally see that with you.
Yeah.
Like, you love talking about it, and you have so much knowledge and background. And why do you think there's this incredible upsurge of science in this field right now?
Well, thank God. And what's super cool is we're finally actually looking at women.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Right? I love what Stacey Sims says. Dr. Stacey Sims is like, women are not small men. It's like, we're finally looking at women. We're different. And that's really exciting too. And I think it's just a trend that's going to become reality. Because so often there's you look at diets and you can just kind of grab the trends, right? But this one, it feels like finally, with all the focus on longevity, the exercise physiologists are now, the gurus.
Yeah.
And back when I was in school, I felt like the peasant in the healthcare practitioner field. As the exercise physiologist, it was like, oh, you. And really, when you look at longevity, the single most important thing you can do for longevity is exercise.
Absolutely.
The right type.
Absolutely, the right type. And that's exactly what I'm so excited about, is we have real concrete data that's irrefutable about the importance of VO2 max, about the importance of muscle mass and muscle strength related to longevity. There's very little argument. You can't argue against it, that we need to do it. And now we're really honing in on the right dose. How do we customize these programs and the fitness activity to the individual? And like you said, women, I want to dive into that with you in depth too, because I think that's a really important topic and you have a lot of science about it. So on this kind of a trajectory that we're going, what is the one thing that you feel that you wish most people knew about the topic of fitness?
Well, back when I started, it was very much a vanity thing. People, in fact, me, Mark Sisson, Body by Jake, Tony Horton, we were the first personal trainers, and everyone hired you because they wanted to look better. It was never about performance. It was never about health. There's some very weird things that you still see to this day about fitness that I think people are concerned about. And what I'd love to really say to the women especially is lift weights. Do not worry about getting big. 40 years of doing this, I've never seen a woman who is lifting weights and dialing in their diet get bigger. They get tighter. Muscle's your metabolic spanx. But on the flip side of that, what happens if you do show up a little bit bigger? Time to stop playing small, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think this renewed interest and focus in strength training, especially with women, I think changing your perspective on how we look. Who cares? So you have some muscle. That actually looks good now. And I think what you're seeing now in social media is women flaunting it instead of trying to avoid it. And that's great.
Well, we really have to get away from the scale as a metric of success.
Absolutely.
Because as long as we are using a scale and we aren't using body composition, we'll be forever, challenged by this whole thing. And I'll tell you an interesting story. And I was thinking about the other day because I went, this really changed the trajectory of my entire life. This little incident that happened in my teens, and I'm so grateful to it. In my teens, because I was 6 feet tall, I naturally was like, I should be a model. And I remember going to a modeling agency, and I was a gymnast and a ballerina really dumb sports for a 6-foot-tall person, but it was very strength-focused, right? I go to this modeling agency. I look about the same as I look right now, and they told me I needed to lose 20 pounds.
Oh, my gosh.
And so I go home and I start counting calories. And I remember I would write it on a little calendar. And I was doing loads of exercise, counting calories, dropped 10 pounds. My dance teacher thinks I'm anorexic. And what I'm noticing is the things that I was able to do, I now can't do. Like I'm losing my strength. And it was a moment that changed everything because I thought, do I want to be strong or skinny?
Right.
And I chose strong. And then I started working out with the high school football team in the weight room. So, and I think this is a very important thing because for women for so long, it was skinny.
Yes.
And what we need to focus on is strong as the new skinny, right?
Right. I think when you get strong, you will also lose weight. You will also have a better body composition, and you'll have all the benefits you're looking for with being skinny without having the metabolic disease aspect of being skinny
and without having to try to maintain your weight. I'm sure you've heard of TOFI or sarcopenic obesity, thin outside, fat inside, where they found that the people who were struggling with that were the people that were trying to maintain weight through diet alone. And when you put on muscle, your metabolism's so great, you don't have to worry about it. It's a non-issue. You can actually eat, you know? And if you're eating correctly, you're not going to be hungry anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say your metabolism lives in your muscle. Like we think it's somewhere
a great
else.
Statement.
The liver, right. It lives
I'm going to quote you.
You can use that one for sure. But yeah, the more muscle you have, the better your metabolism works, the less chance of metabolic disease. It's all about the muscle mass.
Which means we should be packing on. It's like, I think of it so much as a retirement account. We should be packing on as much muscle as we possibly can. And I just want to emphasize to women, you'd be lucky. You'd be dancing up and down if you could put 2 pounds of muscle on a month.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like this is no easy feat to put on a bunch of muscle.
It's not. And I want to go over some specific protocols that you give for men and women about putting on muscle, because I think that's really where we need to hone in on, because there's so much misinformation out there and people are just confused and people don't know like how much, what's the right dose? How does protein play into this? And so we should go dive into each one of those topics. But before we do that, you talk a lot about aging powerfully. And I want to tie in the longevity conversation as well. So tell us
why do I say that? It's like, forget aging gracefully. And I still hear this all the time. Well, age gracefully. I'm like, no, we do not want to age gracefully. So we have two distinct types of muscle fibers. We have slow twitch and fast twitch. And then we have these hybrid fibers that can convert to either one. Women tend to have more slow twitch than fast twitch. We're all different snowflakes, but we tend to have more. And it's the fast twitch that's really capable of more hypertrophy. As we age, we start to lose more fast twitch than slow twitch. Now, here's why this is important. Women, when you look at a lot of the activities women tend to do, they tend to do more things that are not going to really work their fast twitch muscle fibers. Most women are not doing sprint training, power training, that type of thing. CrossFit would be a great example of things that are going to work fast twitch. But things like yoga and walking, these are slow twitch muscle fiber activities predominantly. Right. Yeah. And that means that if I'm focused on those, then those hybrid fibers are going to move into slow. And now I'm atrophying and losing my fast twitch. So I'm just making myself slower. And that is the opposite of aging powerfully. And so that is why when you look at what do we need to do as we age, we need to prioritize fast twitch muscle fibers, because if we don't use them, we do lose them. Right? And,
absolutely.
I think the important thing here is the less you do, the less you can do. And the more you do, the more you can do. So I have a very different idea about training than I see most people doing out there. And this really started back when I was working in physical therapy. And most of my grad work was in spinal lifting biomechanics. And what I saw in physical therapy and what we were taught in school, we were taught two really dumb things in grad school. Number one, don't lift weights until you lose the weight. That is so wrong.
Yeah.
That is so wrong.
I remember hearing that back then.
It's still out there.
It is.
It is still out there.
It's sad that people still think that that's reality.
The other bizarre one was, and this was especially so obvious to me, focusing on lifting biomechanics. They were like, if you have a bad back, avoid extension exercises. Don't work your back. Just do flexion and work your abs. I go, that would make you worse.
Right.
That would make you weaker.
Absolutely.
We have this thing in muscle physiology called reciprocal inhibition. If you're flexing forward to work your abs, your back muscles have to not do anything. Otherwise, you would be static. You couldn't move. So if you focus on one area at the expense of the other, that other area gets weaker.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you look at why people tend to not exercise, the number one reason is time, of course.
Yes.
Right? And that's an excuse. If you don't have time, find time. Just make time. There's nothing more important than this. But the other reason is some type of an injury. Now, when I was 17, I blew out my knee. And then when I was 21, I broke my foot. Just dumb sports injuries. And those became my whys. For so many people to go, I have a knee injury, so I can't work out. I was like, I have a knee injury, I have to work out. And I literally had a bone-on-bone, very bad knee that they were like, you must have a total knee replacement. I put it off for 30 years because of how strong I had everything around it. And so that's what I want to emphasize. If you're listening, you go, oh, I can't do these things because of arthritis, because of an injury. No, that's why you want to do these things. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think even in surgery, like my background is surgery, and we used to have people just lay in bed. We called it bed rest for a week after any surgical procedure. And people would get infections. They would get sicker. They would not recover well. And then the moment the entire thinking went to early ambulation, which is now, right after you get a knee surgery done, you walk. You walk pretty much when you hit the floor, you go walking the same day. And people are getting out of the hospital in like a day now. Now they're doing outpatient knee replacements. So this concept of early ambulation in surgery especially can actually prevent that muscle loss, which then leads to worsening of the disease process. And so the same is true with if you have an injury, train around the injury, right? I think this knees over toes guy, he talks a lot about this as well, how to keep your knees healthy, which is training around the injury, developing the muscles around the injured joint. So very point well taken. Back to the slow twitch and the fast twitch muscle fibers. I think it's a really important concept for people to understand because I think a lot of people think going to yoga, doing Pilates, all these things, they're exercising. But and I'm not saying anything bad about those exercises.
And they're great.
They're great, right.
They're a form of exercise.
Right.
Just like we know there's nutrition, we've got protein, carbs, fat, we've got hydration, we've got there's all sorts of things. In exercise, we've got all sorts of things.
Right.
And so when you look at it, you've got aerobic cardiovascular training with the ultimate goal there to have good VO2 max. Right. You've got muscle mass. And when you look at training muscle, you've got both your muscle size and quality muscle. We don't want fatty muscle. You've got muscle strength and you've got muscle power. They're three different things. And we know that as we age, while, starting around age 30, you can lose up to 1% of your muscle mass a year. Well, it's 2 times as much for strength and 3 times as much. I think it's 2 to 4% strength and 6 to 8% power.
Wow.
That's because of that loss of fast twitch. So you've got, the muscular component, you've got the cardiovascular component, and then you've got that balance, agility, stability component. They're all important.
Yes.
Right? They're all important. But then you have to think, okay, where do I need to prioritize? And I would imagine for most women, fast twitch muscle fibers and putting on that quality muscle is going to be super important because we tend to, if you look at most women's history, they did a lot of cardio, and then some flexibility work. And I find that most people who love flexibility work are generally the people who shouldn't be doing flexibility work because they're hyper-flexible to begin with.
Right. Yeah, I see that a lot too. It's really interesting when you tell people, I'm so happy about your daily yoga routine, but we really need to start adding some strength training to it. And on those 3 categories, I always say, if you had to pick one type of exercise, you only had 30 minutes, once a week to exercise, what would you pick? I would say strength training, because you get with that an improvement in your VO2 max and also an improvement in your flexibility and balance and
Right.
all of that too.
You can do resistance training in a way to incorporate in some high-intensity interval training, to incorporate in balance, stability, and flexibility. So you can really get it all with that if that's the only time you have.
Right, absolutely. So let's dive a little bit more into like specific protocols then. So, and I want to talk about women and men together and also separately, right? Because I think women need to do things potentially a little bit differently. And I would love to dive into some of the reasons why. But I would think that most of the listeners of this podcast, they're probably, somewhere in their early 40s or even later. And we might have some younger listeners as well. How does exercise routines change as you age? So say you're between 20s and then 40s and then 60s. How would you kind of think through that?
So in your teens and 20s, there's something that I think doesn't change, and that is that need for building and maintaining muscle. And when you really look at it in the perfect world, if you could focus on that in your teens and 20s, that would be amazing.
Why is that?
Because you're going to now lay down muscle, have great mitochondrial function, and it's going to be easier to maintain that as you age. Right. Now, you can build muscle at any age. When I did my doctoral work at USC in exercise science, and it was exercise science with nutrition and aging. We had like 80 and 90-year-old athletes in there, and they were amazing.
Incredible.
But the better the foundation, the easier it's going to be. So that's really laying your foundation during that time that I think is super important. I actually have an algorithm. So I don't know that it's that important to focus on change as much as individually it's important to focus on where your deficits might be. So someone who is, let's say, they've got really good, this is my example. I love resistance training. I would lift weights all day, every day, to the expense of HIIT training or or flexibility yoga. Like yoga, kicking and screaming, I go in. But I do it because I know I need to do it because I need the flexibility and the stability. Right. Resistance training, especially heavy stuff, I do it all day. Yeah. So what we have to look at with someone is when we look at your body composition, how's your skeletal muscle mass? How's your strength? How's your power? And then what's going on with your cardiovascular fitness? How's your VO2 max? How's your balance? How's your flexibility? And really, whether you're in your 20s, your 40s, your 60s, what do we need to prioritize? I don't know that it shifts that much as we age. Right. Really, it's really what everyone's a snowflake. And for someone who's got great flexibility. And again, what I see with especially women, they've got great flexibility. They'll do more flexibility. Yeah. I've got great strength. I'll do more strength. So what you really want to do is strengthen the weaknesses. And in life, I generally like to strengthen the strengths. Right. But in this one, you want to strengthen the weaknesses.
Got it. So how are you evaluating muscle power and strength? What metrics
Here's
are
how
you
we
using?
can walk all this through. And where I really like to start with someone is do a DEXA scan, know your body composition, and then take that home and get a bioimpedance machine at home, knowing that it's not as accurate. But it doesn't matter. You are looking for relative, not absolute. So you could go do a DEXA if you're really working on shifting body composition, do one every 6 months. But every day you get on that bioimpedance scale. At the same time, you wake up, like my husband will go weigh in at night. I go, what are you doing? That's completely irrelevant. Get up in the morning. We have a scale at home that reports to Bluetooth, so we have it charted in our phone, so we can just track it, and we track the trends. You do not track it every day and make yourself crazy, because every day it will bounce up and down. So we track the trend, make sure that when you're looking at bioimpedance, it's looking at total body water. So again, that'll shift. Maybe you're overhydrated, underhydrated, but you're looking for a trend over time that your total body water is maintaining or increasing. And that will show that you've actually been able to hold on to or build muscle. So that's one thing that we're looking at. Those home units now are making, and again, this is predictions about your visceral adipose tissue, your bone. I don't buy it. Yeah. I'm really looking at it purely for total body water. Once a week, I say do a waist and hip measurement. So you have your waist to height, waist to hip. And then every 6 months do a DEXA. So that's a starting point. But then here's how I walk through it. Next thing you would do is, and I think you're doing VO2 maxes at your office, right?
Yes, we
So
utilize
good.
VO2 max, right?
So, ideally, gosh, wouldn't it be great if every office was like your office and you came in and things you had were you had a DEXA scan, you had VO2 max, you did grip strength, you could check power by doing a vertical jump. Very easy to do at home, by the way. All you have to do is reach up with a pencil in your hand, mark a spot, then jump up as high as you can, mark the spot, and then check the difference between it. But you would do that. You would do a balance test. Simple, just cross your hands, lift your foot up, right? Do it with both sides. And then we would have some metrics to start with. Where I like to start people is the first thing that I do is just have them track their activity. How many steps a day? The average person is getting somewhere around 3,000 steps a day. That is unbelievable to me. Like unbelievable.
It's crazy. The sedentary behavior of our society now has just gone off a deep end and is leading to massive increases in mortality risk. For every 10% of time that you spend sedentary over 4 hours, you have a 10% increase in all-cause mortality. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, that's insane. So that's where I like to start is let's just now track your steps and let's get those steps up to that 8,000 plus. And once I get them to 8,000, I'm like, let's get them to 10. Now let's add a rucking vest and add some intensity in. So I start there because I know that if we get that in, it's actually going to make everything else easier. So I think that is always step one, and then increasing the intensity. Now you live in the hills, so you can go out and walk. I live in Florida, so I think for women too, rucking vests are amazing. It's like so often you see it with the guys in these military vests. I'm like, where's the cute vest for the gal? But for women, especially for bone mineral density, throwing on a weighted vest is fantastic. And you start with 5 or 10 pounds, but you should be able to get this thing up to 25 pounds. And now you're stressing your joints, and you want to, right? We've got to put the stress on our spine, on our hips, so we stress our joints so that we don't have poor bone mineral density, which I believe, though, just like fasting glucose is really an indicator of poor fasting insulin, and it's a lagging indicator. It's the same with bone mineral density. If we're fixing our muscles, we're likely not going to have issues with bone mineral density.
Absolutely.
Unless we only just started at 60. So that's where I would start. And then now that you've done, so how do we assess muscle mass, muscle power, muscle strength? The muscle mass is going to be the DEXA. And what I love about the DEXA too is you can see how even you are. And then muscle strength, the great proxy for it is grip strength. But the reality is, and you can buy a hand grip dynamometer on Amazon for what, $30, and then you test both sides. And what's nice about grip strength is if your grip strength decreases, it's actually an overtraining sign. But, what else do I love to do? Push-ups. I'd love to see you go into the doctor's office and you have to do push-ups and see how many you can do.
Absolutely.
Right?
A thing that I like to do too is I send patients home with I want you to do these 5 weightlifting exercises with your trainer at the gym and tell me where you max out, right? Knowing what their 1 rep max is. And then there's programs online now that you can kind of correlate that with age and sex and find out where you kind of should be to be in the, the bell-shaped curve somewhere in the middle. And so even if you just are listening to this and you are going to the gym, knowing what your 1 rep max is for things like a bench press, a squat, it's such powerful information because then you know how much catching up you need to do or if you're doing okay on that too, right?
And you can do it predicted. So you could do 5.
Right.
But here's the big caveat with that I found with most people. They didn't really stop when they were done. They could add another one in the tank. So when you're doing that testing, you really have to get to that, I can't do another one piece. So you want to have someone do it with you so you don't hurt yourself with that. But you can even doing air squats for time over a bench. I mean, there's enough ways you can do this at home. You can do a predicted VO2 max. It's not going to be as good as a VO2 max, but it's also not as painful. But you could do that on a treadmill or you can go do that on a track. So there's all sorts of ways people can identify these things. And the reason I love doing that strength training like you're testing, like you talked about, is it gives you a benchmark and it's so quantifiable. So many of the things that we do, you can't really tell, am I getting better? Well, you can totally tell it with resistance training. In the first couple of weeks you're doing resistance training, no, you're not going to see muscles change. your nerves and muscles have to learn how to communicate with each other. So you'll see big strength increases, but without any real hypertrophy shift. That's going to take a little bit more time to do, but just that change in strength.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. Translates to everything that you're doing. What are those 5 exercises that you send people home with?
Yeah, so I have them do a bench press, 1 rep max on a bench press, a shoulder press, a squat, and we also have them do what are the other 2? We have them do a bicep curl, and then
Maybe
we pick from one
pull-up
more.
or a hang?
Yeah, we do a 1-minute hang, absolutely. And so that's, we try to get them to do at least a minute. Some people can do more than a minute. Some people can't even do like 10 seconds. And so those are,
Right.
Yeah. And we actually have a list of 10 of them. And then we pick 5 that they feel the most comfortable doing. Some people don't have access to a gym, so then we'll use a different proxy.
Yeah.
But just to highlight this, it's so important that everyone knows where they fall in power and strength.
Right.
And
well, let's
VO2
talk
max
about the
capacity.
difference with power and strength, because I
Yes.
think it's confusing. And, so VO2 max is really clear, and how you train for that is interesting and painful. But strength, muscle is different, where you have muscle size, and then you have muscle strength, and then you have muscle power. And you actually train for these differently. And what's interesting is if you really want to get strong, you could get stronger without that much hypertrophy. And I'll see women at the gym, and they don't want to lift the heavy weights because they don't want to get big, but they're doing 20 reps, multiple sets of a weight that they can, they're actually pushing themselves on. Well, that's going to cause more hypertrophy than the, 10 sets of 3 reps of something. So, that is one that's important for people to understand, is time under tension and that volume that really does a lot of the hypertrophy. So training for hypertrophy, we want more muscle, because muscle is really, I call it the metabolic Spanx. It holds everything in tighter. It's going to burn more calories. It requires more calories for that muscle protein turnover. It's also, I think of it, I know it's called the glucose sink. I call it the sugar sponge. This gives carbohydrates a great place to land, rather than excess being converted to fat and stored as body fat. So you now have carbohydrate stores in your muscles, and it's your immune system. So it really is, how do I become more insulin sensitive so I can burn fat all day long and have a better metabolism? Muscle's all about it. So that's muscle. The strength is, what can you move, the heaviest thing you could lift one time, where for hypertrophy, it tends to be time under tension and volume. I've divided the body into 4 parts. So I have upper body pushing. That's chest press, overhead press. I love that you said overhead press for bone density, overhead press and squats for the win. But these are things that work your chest, shoulders, triceps. And I focus on compound movements. I always say you don't train to get better at the gym, you train to get better at life. And so you want to do compound, metabolically very costly exercises. I don't really ever do bicep curls or tricep curls, tricep extensions, unless I'm really bored, waiting for someone.
Right.
I do dips and push-ups and overhead presses and things like that. So that's pushing. Pulling are things like pull-ups and pull-downs and bent-over rows. I love bent-over rows because they're so functional to everyday life.
Love them.
Picking something up off the floor. Love, hate them. And then, so that's, again, back of the shoulders, biceps, lats. And then you have hip and thigh hinging and squatting.
Right.
And so squats and step-ups and lunges. And I don't really do much single leg stuff except for leg curls, deadlifts, things like that. And then power core, I will throw some abs in during rest periods at the gym. But if you are doing your resistance training correctly, you should be working your core.
Right.
So if you do a squat, if you do a push-up, if you do a pull-up, like, you should be working your core doing all those things. So I'm like, you can do those for rest breaks in between sets, or if you're supersetting. But the reality is, if that's how you're working your core, that's not very functional.
Right.
Because, most of us don't really need to be able to lie on the floor and do a crunch in everyday life, right?
Exactly.
But we need to be able to pick something heavy off the floor. So then, to have more muscle size, it's going to be repeated sets. Now, the research is all over the place on this, of like, how often should you do it? And when you're first starting, you can pretty much do anything and you'll get some gains.
Right.
But once you're further along, generally 15 to 20 sets a week in a specific area is what the recommendations are. It's kind of a bell-shaped curve. So let's say we're doing upper body pushing. Say if you could get into, doing chest press 3 days a week, 5 sets, or maybe you're doing chest press and overhead press and you're doing that 2 days a week, 5 of each.
Right.
So it's really making sure that you're getting to a point where at the end of a set, so I'll go in and let's say I'm doing chest press. I'll do a warm-up set, global warm-up overall, warm-up set of that exercise where you're focusing on really feeling where you're working, paying attention to that. And then I will do 4 sets, generally somewhere in the 8 to 12 range, 8 to 15 range, and with, say, 60 seconds to 2 minutes in between.
Perfect.
Unless I'm doing supersetting, which I will. And so if you want to progress past that, there's all sorts of ways you can do it. You could throw in a strength week. And if you're really focused on building strength, it's shorter. It's somewhere in the 1 to 5 rep range with a longer rest period, like 3 to 5 minute rest period. And, this is where you can actually go. I tease people because I go, most people at the gym are doing scroll workouts.
Yes.
Like, what are you doing? You're not working out. In the time that I just did an entire workout, you did 3 sets of bicep curls.
Exactly.
But, it's great to throw in. I'll throw in a week of strength periodically, and it actually helps me increase my weights when I go back to doing more of a hypertrophy type of training.
Got it.
And then once a week, I like to throw in more of a power training. Now, power is how fast you can move something. And you can throw that into your regular workouts. It's called high velocity resistance training, where you can go really fast on let's say the concentric, the hard part, and then slow it down a little bit on the eccentric. So you can do it there. Or you can lighten up the load a little bit and do some real power moves, like a kettlebell swing, a snatch. Sometimes I'll use those as my warm-ups before I go and do bigger workouts.
Right. I think what, this whole program you put together really highlights the importance of mixing things up, right? And having different types of exercises, different set ranges. And I think that's even more important when you kind of reach plateaus as well.
Yeah.
So mixing it up is another way to get through a plateau. People struggle with plateaus a lot, and it kind of is demotivating. And so what are some of the other ways you get past like a plateau? Yeah,
because I love to design like an 8 to 12 week program. Okay, this is what we're going to do. And if someone's new, it's really think 12 weeks to 16 weeks of doing a lot of just getting your body to understand this, where a lot of it starts with body, just body weight and moving past that. I always like to build up slowly. But once you get past that, you can do some deloading, some tapering. And what I find is that naturally happens in life with me because I'll be traveling and I walk into a gym and I look at this gym. Like I literally walked in when I was with the Perlmutters and Blands and I went into the gym there and they're like, there's a gym on the island we're going to. I'm like, yay, because I brought an exciser or a TRX with me.
Yeah.
The Perlmutters had an exciser and I'm literally on the front of Jeff Bland's boat doing HIIT training. And they're laughing. I'm like doing up, downs, and squat jumps because I was like, all right, there's really not much I can do here.
Yes.
But they said, we have a gym where we're going. I walk in, the heaviest weight's 20 pounds.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, I was like, that's a warm-up. What am I going to do here? So sometimes you just have to innovate. And so I've got it set up now where I can do a body weight workout that's pretty much a functional, it's high-intensity functional training. So it's a HIIT training, but it will get things like, I've got push-ups in there, squat jumps in there, side jumps, all sorts of awful things.
Do you have a video on this?
I actually just did one.
Oh, great.
I did a 10-minute no repeat HIIT training workout. And it's really, when you think about HIIT training, a lot of the time when we, originally HIIT training was you go out and do like sprints and then walk it off, sprints, walk it off. Well, you can do HIIT training in another way called high intensity functional training, which is super cool because it kills 2 birds with 1 stone. And so that could be some squat jumps and then maybe some goddess squats that are easy recovery. And then maybe you're doing some up downs and then some easy side lunges. So you're doing something super hard and then something easy, right? And then super hard, but they're functional moves. So, squat. But so I did this training and it was 10 minutes. And I go, no problem. I kind of tested it out beforehand, but I didn't really run through it till I actually taped it. it's 1 minute of squat jumps and then a minute of squat recoveries, air squat recoveries, and then 1 minute of up downs. And then I think I was holding a plank. And I go, this is really hard. Like this was really, it's hard. 10 minutes, you're done.
Especially after a rapid succession like that,
my
right?
gosh. I'm like, who said planks were recovery? What was I thinking here? And then those skater side jumps with side lunges. I was like, but you're done in 10 minutes.
Right.
So while I like to have, especially when someone's new or intermediate, like give you an 8-week program to do, but then let's take maybe 2 weeks and we can either do a taper down, we could do 2 weeks of power training. You can mix things up. It keeps it fun. You will continue to progress. And again, you can progress, you can add more volume. Add another set,
right?
Add more reps to the set, add some speed to the set.
For sure.
So there's all sorts of ways to do it that will make it more fun.
Right.
Now, I have one more hack for you.
Please.
So the other way that we do this is we've been going to this yoga studio in Tampa for like 2 years, except Tim the other day, like a couple months ago, looked at me and goes, I'm done with yoga. And I'm like, great.
Oh, no.
Now I'm going to have to go do this by myself. But the other thing they had there was it's these 3 huge warehouses. And one of the warehouses is a HIIT warehouse. So I book us in there, and I don't pay any attention to what it is. We'd never seen it, and it was like perfect timing. So we go walk into this, and they are like, you're the yoga couple. Are you sure you want to be here? And I go, both of us are so competitive. We're like, get out of the way. Yeah. The room, half the room, it's all black, said grind time. Half the room was sprint treadmills, and the other half of the room was these weight stations, so you alternated. So the weight station had like kettlebells and big weight plates and a TRX and a big step bench. And so you would do some sprinting rounds, and then you would go over and do like, some jumps or some kettlebell swings or a snatch. And we go in the first time, and I look around and go, all right, I could have given birth to everyone in the room. Maybe they'd even be my grandkids.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
And they're all super fit, and they are fired up. And I'm like, perfect. And this is what's really important. Someone asked me, they're like, how do you make sure that you stay fit? I go, you find fitter friends.
Yes.
You always hear that, your income's the average of the 5 people you hang out with. I'm like, well, your fitness level is too.
Absolutely.
So if you want to get fitter, don't go to like when I first started going to yoga, I was going to a yoga class at LA Fitness where I was the youngest person in the room. There were all these old men and women, and the women still could kick my butt. But the guys, I was like, I found my thing, do yoga with old guys.
Right.
I'll be better. And I kind of fooled myself into thinking I was good at this until I went to a San Diego yoga class and got my butt kicked.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing here. If you want to get stronger and fitter, go to where people are way stronger and fitter than you.
So when you were at this studio, this warehouse, these young kids are there, and they're super strong and super fit.
They were fitter, and I was stronger than them. I will say.
I bet you kicked their butts still.
On the weight side of things, I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah. But on the sprinting side, did you see that meme going around the internet about how after the age of 30, like 5% of us will ever sprint again? There's no
science behind that at all, right?
However, I realized that except for one like soccer game where it was the parents against the kids, I had not sprinted at all for years and years and years. And so I got on this sprint treadmill and I came home, and for a week, I mean, it hurt to touch my thighs. And so what I realized was I needed a sprint treadmill.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I have to do this.
Yes.
We have to go back to this class. You have to do those things that are hard and uncomfortable. And you know what's awesome about exercise? It is a controlled environment to do hard things.
Right.
So that when you get out in the wild, those things are easy for you.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes, exactly. And it's so important to highlight the fact that like when you're at the gym and if something feels really hard, of course, be safe, get a trainer to help you, but that's probably what you want to be doing more of. So you discovered it on sprints. I actually go run sprints on the beach at least once a week. And I keep doing them until I can't do them anymore because that sprint training, not only is it great for VO2 max, but like you said, it's so functional because in life, there's going to be times where you need to sprint.
Right.
And if you're not doing it, especially I find as I age, if I'm not doing it, I lose the ability quickly.
You do, because again, you will start to lose that fast twitch. That's why I hate this idea. I don't know if you remember when there was that whole emphasis on slow training, and I was like, I mean, I just went from an athlete perspective. You're going to be able to do things at the rate at which you train. Why on earth would we train slow? I don't want to go slow in life.
Yes.
So you have to be able to push yourself, and you want to push yourself in those, in controlled environments.
Right.
Because it's, for most of us, we're not getting injured at the gym. We're getting injured out in the world where we stepped off a curb, where we had to get out of the way of something. And the rotten stats of breaking a hip after 60. I mean, we've got to avoid that at all costs. So you've got to maintain that flexibility. That's where I'll use a TRX, by the way. My TRX trainer I use so I can do full squats. Because full squats on my own with a knee and a hip replacement are a little tough, but I can do full squats and pistol squats using a TRX, and I just try to do it with as little touch point as possible.
That's a good hack to getting squats, and if you have knee injuries or hip injuries or something.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, because I can do squats, and I do heavy squats and heavy leg presses, but to get past, hips at knee level takes a bit.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
What about mixing in some cardio training into this? So you gave some really good strength routines.
You can tell what I love.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think the sprint training, actually, what you're talking about right now, is an excellent way to build VO2 max and get some cardio training in. Do you have other kind of protocols around cardio training?
Yes. So I love HIIT training for cardio. Here's my cardio philosophy. I think that the first thing that we do is look at how we can just move more in life. I still remember I was doing a lecture in I don't even remember what town it was, somewhere in Kansas, I think. And most of the audience was obese or morbidly obese. And this one guy pings me a month later and he goes, "I've lost 10 pounds. And I go, "What'd you do?" He said, "All I did was take the stairs." Because I just started taking the stairs. I went, we underestimate how impactful that can be. So if in life all you started to look at was, how do I just park farther away, take the stairs, and you really gamify the steps. So that's my first step, is let's get the steps in.
Just get more movement in.
Get more movement
general,
in.
Right.
Get more movement in. And then that high-intensity interval training is my next focus. And especially for women, I'm not as focused on the zone 2 training for women. I'm much more focused on women of, let's get your steps in with a rucking vest as much as possible. Like, you can be at home wearing a rucking vest, right? Get the rucking vest to load your spine. Let's get that resistance training in. And then let's start incorporating in high-intensity interval training. And back when I first started doing high-intensity interval training with people, which was like 30 years ago, because I always was, and when I was in grad school, all of our research was done on cardio training. And back then, the whole way people thought was, if you couldn't do 30 minutes, you shouldn't even bother, because you're not going to get into the fat burning zone.
Right.
And then a study came out, and it said that they looked at one group that was told to do 30 minutes a day, and one group was told to do 3 times 10. And the 3 times 10 had better cardiovascular adaptations. They had better shifts in body composition. And the whole idea back then was, well, it's because you either did 30 minutes or no minutes.
Right.
But I actually think there was more to it. I think it was the fact that they were kind of doing exercise snacks all throughout the day. They were staying active, that if they knew they could do 10 minutes, they were going to do it a lot more intensity than, say, they would do it 30 minutes. So I really love to focus on how do we get more throughout the day. But this high-intensity interval training, the way I used to dose it was 30 to 60 seconds all out, a minute recover. And now I look at it and go, if we're focusing on VO2 max, I think that Norwegian 4x4 is really fantastic. And I would love to see us all do that once a week, where you do 4 minutes hard, 3 minutes recover, do it 4 times. It's hard.
That's hard.
It's hard. It's hard. So maybe you just start with 4 minutes, and then you bump it up to 4 minutes with that 3 minute. And then you bump it up from there. And it might take you a month or 2 months to get to the 4 minutes. But the other cool thing with high-intensity interval training is it's cool and not cool. It never gets easier. So, where you might be doing 4-minute sprints right now and you're sprinting at 5.2, in a couple months it might be 5.8 or 6.2, right? So you just continue to get better. You don't go longer. You go harder, just like with resistance training.
Right.
You just always go harder. So I think that...
So limit it to 4 minutes and just keep increasing the speed.
Well, what I'd love to see is, you never go past the 4. For that Norwegian 4x4, that's really the VO2 max. I think that one once a week would be a great one. 1 to 2 other times a week, it is literally doing anywhere from, and I like to mix these up a bunch, because if you look at it, if you're doing very short, like you're doing a 20-seconder, now it's really creatine phosphate. It's going to be a different energy system. If we can go up to a minute, it's a little different. 4 minutes is different, but I'll generally go between 20 and 60. And I'll just push it and recover and push it and recover. And I'll just mess around with that and play with it.
Got it.
If I'm really short on time, I might just do that, 20-second, 10-second, 20-second.
Yes. Sprint training intervals.
Sprint training intervals. But I think you play around with those a bunch. And ideally hits at least twice a week. Resistance. I'm also messing around with resistance training because I just looked at a study that showed better body composition shifts with people doing resistance training 3 times a week, full body versus, splitting. But I think it depends on someone's priorities. Like if I've got someone who's really sarcopenic, I would probably have them do resistance training, upper one day, lower the next, every other day, and maybe, every day.
Right, exactly. And you want to hit the muscle groups harder on one day. And it's all dependent on how much time the person has at the gym as well. So you got to really kind of fit it to what their time schedule is as well. And if they're completely undertrained or they haven't trained in a long time, you have to start people off really slow.
Really easily. That's where I love a TRX, because it could be as simple as doing, an upper body pushing exercise and pulling exercise with a TRX in a squat, and they're all assisted.
Right.
And then you can make them harder. But most of that stuff is body weight to start. Plus, you could do that at home or when you travel. Like you can literally do that anywhere. And if you think about it, between, you have a TRX, you could do a pulling exercise, you could do a pushing exercise, you can do a squat. You can do an air squat over a chair. You can do a push-up on the floor or against a wall or against a table. There's so many things that you can do wherever you are. There's really no excuse.
Exactly. And I think what's helped me a lot on that, because, I travel a lot, you travel a lot, is you have to have these things easily accessible in your back pocket. So I love to have like videos by people like yourself, just kind of downloaded on my YouTube. They're there when I'm traveling. I can pick from 1 of 5 different videos. So it's not too much choice there. And I just do that, And so I also travel with a TRX as well. I have a great TRX videos, but sometimes I don't feel like doing TRX. So I have a body weight one as well. And so I think having those options when you travel, because if you travel and you don't have those options, you're just not going to do it. And so,
So what I do when I travel to make sure all of this happens is I check the hotel. We actually call ahead to know what the hotel has. I do not believe if it says fitness room, it's like house shopping and finding the house that's quaint. This is a fitness room. It usually is a room with 3 pieces of cardio equipment, and one of them's broken. So you really want to find out what they have or what's close by. So that's how we choose our hotels.
Super helpful.
Is like the one we're staying at right now has amazing equipment in there. So I know that we're covered, and I knew Tim coming out of his hip surgery, I was like, going to go get you on a bike.
Immediately.
You're going to be moving. I know you don't want to. You'll feel better. So, that's part of it is see what's around. And sometimes my gym is the stairwell. You can do great HIIT training in a stairwell. Oh, yes, you can. Like it's amazing.
You're right. There's stairwells everywhere. So
yes,
people
there
might think
are.
you're crazy running up and down the stairs.
There's no one in the stairwell.
No one's there anyway, right?
Every once in a while, there's a random smoker on the stairwell. But other than that, you're not going to see anybody, so it doesn't matter. Right? Just make sure you don't get yourself locked out. I've done that before too.
Right. Are you training? Are you strength training 5 days a week, 7 days a week? Like, what's your protocol?
It really depends. If I were home, now I'm flipping my schedule right now. Because of my priorities, like my priority really is to focus more on VO2 max and HIIT training. So when I'm home, I'm focusing more on doing full body because I've got good muscle mass, and then doing HIIT the next day. I do 1 day of yoga. On the road, though, I'll do a lot of times I'll go in and do upper body one day, lower body the next. I'll throw some HIIT training in on either of those sessions.
Got it.
Yeah. So it just depends. I hit each body part minimally twice a week. I like to do it 3 times a week. And one of the fun things when you travel is you naturally mix things up.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Kind of have to sometimes.
right, you do. I'm focused a lot right now on pull-ups. I'm really working on my pull-ups.
Yeah.
Right now I can do 4 to 5 sets of 6, but I really want to get it to sets of 10.
Wow.
So that's what I'm working on.
Yeah.
Yes.
I always think I need to work on my pull-ups too because I can't do that many. And so I'm always like trying to get myself, you got to go hit the pull-up bar. But you're right. Once again, doing the hard things that you don't do a lot of, those are the ones you want to focus on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, you look at it, because yesterday I had a whole conversation with myself. It's good you're just here, do the pull-ups. No, you're just, but the reality is it's like you do the pull-ups. That was what, 20 seconds?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Come on.
I know you can do it. Absolutely. Yeah. Even if you just show up at the gym and just do a set of pull-ups, you've won the day.
Exactly.
If you're not exercising
If you
at all.
go to the gym, you do a flexed arm hang, some push-ups, and some air squats, winner.
Total win.
Right? It all
exactly.
counts.
Yeah. And that's why even though hotel gyms sometimes aren't very inspiring, I still at least do something there because at least I got something in. It's a win for the day. I'm also a big believer in working in exercise throughout the day. Exercise snacks have been a game changer for my own personal health and my strength and my VO2 max. And so 45 minutes of work, I will always have an egg timer. I actually have an app on my screen now that shuts my screen off.
Nice.
Yes,
in the perfect world, we would be doing it that way.
Absolutely.
Because when you look back, I even think back 40, 50 years ago, we never sat all day long.
Never.
Look what it was when we were kids in school that they've now messed up. But it was like you would sit, then you would have a little pee. Then you would sit, then have this is what adults need.
Right.
They need PE breaks all throughout the day. And there's easy things that you could do. So I'm actually designing a little challenge around this right now. So I'm glad you're bringing it up.
Yes.
But you think about it and go, you could get the Exciser. I think this machine is so underrated. Have you seen this thing?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
What
so
is
it's
an Exciser?
X-ISER.
Okay.
And it is this heavy-duty little stepper. It looks silly. You'll go, that? Hard. And if you have some dumbbells, you can do your stepping while you're doing overhead presses and bicep curls. So you have balance, stability, it's HIIT training. So it is a great little exercise snack to do throughout the day. Just like you could do up downs, you can do air squats, you can do jump squats.
Sure.
I really want people to put in some jumping power moves. Super important. And, as you age, you might go, I shouldn't do that. No, you should do that. But you can do it in such a controlled setting where you're coming up from, a chair. So I like to have people do air squats over a chair and then just do a little jump at the top. That's it. Little jump.
Yeah. I have a box jump outside of my office and I have a set of dumbbells and I'm going to get this Exciser thing.
This
awesome.
Exciser is the coolest thing. And then if you have a TRX, like you've got so many cool things.
Yes. And a dream would be to also have like an assault bike as well.
Yes.
I love the assault bike. Do you like the assault bike?
So at home, that was what I used to rehab my knee when I couldn't even move my knee and I could only use my arms and leg. At home, I have a Peloton, I have a Stairmaster, I have a sprint treadmill, and I have battle ropes, a TRX, like all my stuff. And I just have no more room to put anything else. I cannot get anything else. I had to get rid of my big step mill with the steps going around. I was like, enough.
I think, it would be such an incredible thing for a business to do or an office to do is to have just a few pieces of equipment in a room somewhere where people can take their break, go in there, kind of like instead of like a water break or in addition to a water break, go and just have a quick
Actually, I don't
break.
think it should be in the room. What would be really amazing when you think about it is, and I did this for a while where I put my Exciser where whenever I got up, I would trip over it. Now, in my office, I have a stand-up desk and I have a walking pad.
Yes, so do I.
And so, but if you think about it, what would be great is right by the coffee machine, you would have like a TRX and an Exciser, and you would have a little points board where people would check off their exercise doses, right? And I still think about exercise snacks because I was coaching. I'm working with someone who literally has 200 pounds to lose. And so I started with exercise snacks and he was so excited to hear exercise snacks because he thought he got to snack. And I'm like, no, so I get the concept, but it's like, I almost feel like think more micro doses that we really want to accumulate all throughout the day.
Microdose the exercise.
Every time you do that, think of what you're doing with, blood sugar. Like if what I love about Europe is you actually walk after you eat. And just think if every time you ate, you went and did the exercise or TRX, you sucked some of that blood sugar into your muscles, you changed the game.
You change the game of your metabolism completely. And the key to that whole thing, what we're talking about here is that you need to have that consistent, constant physical activity in your day by working in exercise snacks. A treadmill desk or a walking desk is incredible if you can get one, but at least doing something throughout the day. That should be separate and in addition to going to the gym.
Yeah.
You need both. They're both two very important parts of metabolic health and fitness. And so you gave us a great protocol for a gym workout. You're giving us great protocols for throughout the day workout. And then on top of that, another layer to just make sure you're getting in enough movement throughout the day is activity counting, step counting, those kind of things. I think if you get those three big picture buckets in place in your day-to-day life, you are going to lose weight, build muscle. Your VO2 max is going to go up. You're going to live longer. You're going to not fall. You're not going to get frail. And that's it. Like it does sound a little bit overwhelming to start with.
But you're not going to start there. So that's the big thing.
Yeah.
Is if you live like a healthy, lean person, you will become one. Right. So if you want to be that, just do the habits, but start with one. That's why I like to start with the activity first.
Yes.
And the activity has to be all throughout the day. So it's not the end of the day and you're like, oh my gosh, I've gotten 1,000 steps in. And then add in the resistance training.
Right.
And then add in the high intensity interval training. And then get a yoga class in once a week.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Even a 30-minute flow. I actually recorded. I go, listen, I'm not a yogi. I don't play one on YouTube, but I'm going to record. Like, if I can do this, you can do my yoga flow.
I love that.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's also important. But like you said, it's kind of one of those things that if you had to make a priority list of what you're doing, the strength training is going to be on top. In addition to moving constantly all day, right?
Well, you could actually do, like, I don't know if you do, I love, they're called Romanian deadlifts or stiff leg deadlifts. Mm-hmm. Now, one-legged stiff leg deadlifts, it's like going to yoga. It is not easy, right? So
it's a lot of balance.
You can incorporate some of these in. You're not going to get the strength you would get by doing, say, a straight Romanian deadlift, but you'll get the balance piece. So you can do some alternating between these things and incorporate in some.
Right. Absolutely.
Do an overhead press standing on one leg.
Yeah. And you're touching on like functional movements as well, which I think everyone also needs to kind of look at is how do I incorporate functional movements at least once a week or throughout your workout regime. I like to do sled pushes, sled pulls. I think those are very functional. Simulating what you're going to be doing out in life on a day-to-day basis. You know, you might have to push something. You're going to have to pull something.
We were laughing. I just on this last trip, we bought so much stuff in Spain and literally had every suitcase straight up to 70 pounds. Oh, wow. So we have 4 big suitcases at 70 pounds. Then we have 2 carry-ons that are more than 70 pounds because we jacked everything we could, right? We put all the heaviest stuff in there. And we are literally dragging this stuff across the airport. Yeah. And we got into the IT global outage. So now we got all these things we're recruiting. And I go, this is perfect. It's luggage CrossFit.
Yes.
And that's what I look at with a lot of these things is you are training. You're doing that overhead press or that snatch so that you can throw your carry-on into the overhead compartment when you just put 70 pounds in there because you couldn't put it in your suitcase. Exactly. Right? So you look at what you have to do in life. And that's why I don't understand when people go, I can't do a squat because I have bad knees. I go, but you have to get off the toilet.
Yeah. You have to squat.
You have to squat.
Right.
When I lived in Japan, it was crazy because everyone would squat and just wait for the bus or they just squat.
Yeah.
I mean, all the way down squats.
I've totally added that to my daily routine. In fact, I read every morning and I read in a squat now. And it gets painful after about 20 minutes, you know.
20 minutes?
Yeah.
You're 20. Yeah. That's so impressive.
Yeah, I try to stay in it as long as I can. You know, I'm Indian heritage too, so we grew up being in the cross-legged position all the time, you know, like in a crisscross applesauce, basically.
Right.
And so I try to sit that way as much as possible. These chair things that we have really decreased our mobility, and getting off the chair as much as possible, I think, is also an important kind of thing to have in the back of your head.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit. We have some great exercise routines from you. I want to switch to some nutrition-focused topics. So I'd love to get your take on protein intake. A lot of times I talk to my patients about 1 gram per pound body weight of protein should be your goal. And that's just so daunting for people to get there.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So
let's talk protein.
I started out as an exercise physiologist, and I realized that you could not and you can't out-exercise a poor diet, that you have to have both.
Right.
And that is when I went, I better start studying nutrition. You know? And boy, when you put the two together, now if you want to shift your body composition, obviously you have to do resistance training. But the thing that's going to make the biggest change immediately is shifting your diet.
Right.
And you've got to have both. And especially as we age with this whole anabolic resistance that, you know, when you look at your teens and 20s, when you really want to focus on laying down muscle and bone, that's hormonally driven. You can mess up your diet and you can still build muscle. Not the case as we start to get into our 30s and 40s and beyond. And this is where I think it's really important for women, because women, what is the protein phobia with women? I don't understand it.
Yeah.
It is wild. Like, most women won't eat red meat. They're eating more plant-based. And it is just difficult to get the protein in if you're doing that, especially when you look at—
I think it's a fear of bloating. That's what I hear a lot from my female patients. They're just fearful of getting
That's
bloated
so
with protein.
wild. Like, I've never been bloated from protein. You
No.
get bloated from carbs.
Exactly.
Like, that's crazy. It was the other night, we were in Bellevue, Washington after our boat trip, and we went to one of those Brazilian steakhouses.
Yes. Love those.
Okay, so we sit down at the Brazilian steakhouse, and we don't mess with the salad bar. Why would we waste time over there? I wish I'd had a little food scale, because we are now in it to win it with the meat and the lamb and some really good red wine. And we get up the next morning, we both weigh ourselves, because we travel with the bioimpedance scale. I'm like, how did we both lost 2 pounds overnight. You do not get bloated eating protein. Here's what's great when you focus, and I tell people to eat protein first. The reason I tell them that is I know women get full and they didn't get their protein in. And they'll actually end up overeating. I'm sure you've heard of that protein leverage hypothesis, where we're eating protein for the essential amino acids. If we don't get what we need, our body's going to tell us, we think it's cravings. It's not. It's cravings for essential amino acids. It's cravings for our body getting what it needs. If you start with protein, the biggest things I hear from women are, number one, they don't have the cravings that they had because they weren't getting what they're needing, so their body's pushing them to try to get more essential amino acids, and they're not hungry because protein's the ultimate GLP-1 booster, right? So you've got better satiety. You don't have the cravings. You've got, if all you did was take the same amount of calories and divert some off of fat and carbs and divert it over to protein, you're going to lose weight initially, because you've got basically no thermic effect from fat.
Right.
You've got 5 to 10% of the calories from carbohydrates are going to be utilized in metabolism, but it's 20 to 30% of protein. So if all you did was shift some calories off of carbs and fat, you would lose weight right there, because you'd expend more calories in the metabolism and muscle protein synthesis. But the reality is you'll eat less too, because you're not as hungry.
Exactly.
So the very first thing that you want to do is just eat your protein first.
Right.
That's the simplest thing to do.
It's the simplest thing to do. Protein first every meal.
Yep.
You know, a lot of restaurants are not set up that way. They bring you some bread, and then they ask you, do you want
Well,
a
you
salad?
don't ever let them bring you the bread.
Exactly.
And guess what? You're paying. They will do it however you want them to do it.
Right.
So, you know, we eat this way wherever we go. And don't let them bring the bread basket to the table. That's just mean.
Yes.
Like, that's, you know, we know what's going to happen there.
Mean. You're right.
I did a lecture, and for a group, and then some of us went out to dinner afterwards, and I'm watching this woman who is the perfect role model of what I was talking about. She was sarcopenically obese. She was normal weight, high body fat.
Right.
She probably was 35% body fat, not enough muscle. In her early 60s, she sat down at the table, had a glass of wine, had the appetizers, which were carb bombs, had a salad, ordered eggplant, and I had this big steak. And I'm like, I'm going to just share my steak with you. She goes, you're protein shaming me. I go, yes, I am. I am protein shaming you. And I sent her some essential aminos afterwards, because there's the hack that I actually think everyone, especially women 40 plus, if you just had some essential aminos, especially with breakfast, would make a big difference, because then it's sort of that insurance policy that we know you got what you needed, right?
In powder form?
In powder form, yeah.
You just mix it into your
Not
food?
yummy.
Or?
They're not delicious.
No.
They have to have some kind of flavoring to them, because aminos taste icky. You can take them in capsules, but you have to take a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But the other piece is, if just like we talked about with exercise, start with tracking.
Sure.
If you start with your food and all you did at first would go, you know what, I'm just going to track what I eat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the crazy thing that happens when you track what you eat is you change what you eat. Right? It modifies your behavior because you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize. So if you first started with tracking and then went, okay, now I'm going to make sure I'm getting my optimal amount of protein in at each meal, just that alone will change everything. Right? But that's how I like to walk people into diet is I'll start with, okay, we're going to optimize protein. Now, if you insist on doing it all plant-based, we're going to have to get a lot more creative and definitely use those essential amino acids. It's possible, but it's harder.
Absolutely.
And then once we've got that protein dialed and we've kicked out snacks, it's so crazy in Europe.
No one snacks.
No one snacks. No one walks around eating. Right. No one walks around. I was like, only the Americans are walking around with Frappuccinos. No one else is. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? No one's walking down the street eating anything. And they just ate a meal for 2 hours. And that was a short meal. Yeah. Now, granted, it was 10 at night, but, they walked afterwards, right? So
I think the food companies just invented snacking to sell more food.
Oh, yeah. I remember when it started.
Yeah.
So, I still remember back in the 80s when Susan Powder came out. First of all, it was back in the 70s that all of a sudden we had the issues where fat was the villain and sugar is fine. And then in the 80s, Susan Powder was stop the insanity and we're not going to eat fat anymore. Well, you're hungry all the time when you're not eating fat. And then all the snacks came. And you were supposed to graze.
That's right. That's
Remember?
How it was. Yeah.
Grazing. We're supposed to graze.
10 meals a day.
Yeah, because it keeps your metabolism up. It's like, no, it doesn't. It keeps your blood sugar up. Yeah, that was a disaster.
Disaster, yeah.
Disaster.
Exact opposite of what we should have been doing the whole time. So as far as protein dose goes, I think people are aiming really high, but some people need a high dose of protein. And what I like to do is I like to tie it in with DEXA scanning, bioimpedance scale.
Yeah.
And track the directionality of how much skeletal muscle mass you have. If you need to increase skeletal muscle mass, you need to take more proteins. You got to keep aiming higher for protein intake. But once you get to a point where you're maintaining, I think that protein intake, you can probably stop there. And it might not be a gram per pound. It might be less, but what's your thought on that? And I also think as you age, you're going to need more protein as well. So
Definitely.
you have to constantly keep tracking this. I love the daily bioimpedance scale. I have one. I have an H20N, and I think I just bought an H30 actually. InBody is my favorite one that I use. But talk a little bit about the dose.
So I think this is Brad Schoenfeld's work of the 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of target body weight. That makes a ton of sense. Obviously, if you could dose it towards your fat-free mass, you're going to be better off. I mean, I think there's probably an algorithm out there that would say in perfect AI at some point we'll be able to throw in our fat-free mass if we need to increase it, our age, and then we'd also look at, are we healing? Like right now, Tim's healing from surgery.
That's true.
I am cranking him 2 grams per pound of target body weight. Like when my son had a major car accident, nearly died, cranked him and added essential aminos too. Right? So if you're healing, if you're under a lot of stress, or if you're really sarcopenic trying to put muscle on, crank it up. I know there's all this weirdness around too much protein. I think our bigger risk, it's just like when they go, don't take vitamins, you'll have too many vitamins. I go, we have an undernourished country.
Absolutely.
Overfed, undernourished. So I'd rather someone err on the higher side of protein because they're not. Right. But when you look at it and go, if you get used to eating 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of target body weight, you don't stop doing that. Yeah. Like if someone said to you right now, okay, now you're going to cut your protein down, you wouldn't do that.
You would never do that, right?
No, you go, why? I feel great.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I feel fantastic, and I want to make sure that I'm maintaining muscle mass. Now, this whole anabolic resistance and what we lose as we age, I just really would love to see, and I know we don't have this and it's going to be challenging to do with 5% of the population is now metabolically healthy. Right. But it would be very interesting to look at someone who's been doing resistance training their whole life, who's got good muscle mass, and see if anabolic resistance really happens to them or not.
That's a great study.
You know, and also looking at this muscle mass loss and strength loss and power loss and see how much we can impact it. I will tell you that a couple years ago, I couldn't screw a lid off a jar, and I didn't think about it the first time, but the third time I started to go, what the heck is going on? That's when I started doing pull-ups and and hangs, and I'm like, uh-oh, and farmer's carries and stuff like that. So, I mean, we will all lose it, but I've got to assume that the rate that we'll lose it is so much less. And if you've really focused on power and strength and size before, you've got stuff to lose.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then on the nutrition front as well, how are you talking to your clients about their carbs?
Okay. Oh my gosh. So here's my thought on all of this is first optimize your protein.
Right.
Get that dialed. Now, if you're eating animal protein, you are going to get in some healthy fats with it. This is where you are what you eat. Why you want the clean sources, the wild fish, grass-fed beef. I think the hardest thing to get clean is chicken. So, you're eating beef and lamb and fish, and you're going to get some fat there. I think except for fish, I think fatty fish, but I tend to go with the leaner cuts of meat. So the next thing that I do is focus on, let's make sure you're getting in at least 5, but ideally 10 servings of non-starchy vegetables a day and 2 servings of fruit, preferably berries. Then I'm going to look at that and go, okay, you probably use some fat with your veggies. Where are we now? I think kind of baseline, if I was going to look at this, I go, all right, 100 grams of carbs is sort of a baseline, 60 grams of fat, sort of a baseline. And then how do you feel best? Are you someone who's doing a lot of training? You feel better bumping your carbs up higher? Are you someone who's more insulin resistant? You feel better bumping your fat up higher? Because they work opposite each other. What you don't want to ever do is have low protein, high fat, high carbs. That's the standard American diet. We saw what happened with that. That experiment, it's just like the food guide pyramid. It was like, no people group ever ate like this.
No.
Ever. This was created by the cereal companies.
Absolutely. It is so obvious. Like the bottom of the food pyramid became grain.
Like the one thing we could live without. Right. You look at it and go, okay, you cannot live without water. You can't live without protein. You can't live without fat. You can live without carbs.
Right.
You've got a redundant system. But yet we just made a diet based on the one thing we can live without. It's so bizarre.
It was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And now it's getting turned around, but it's taken so long. We lived this way for 50 years, and that's why our population is so sick and tired, right? It's just.
And is it really getting turned around?
I mean, I think people like yourself talking about this is the way we should be managing our diet is helping. But
the government guidelines aren't changing.
No, the government guidelines.
And it makes zero sense. And there's still the guidelines for protein have not been changed despite all these researchers sending in. And if you look at it and go, okay, we based our protein guidelines on young men and looking at nitrogen excretion, which we know underestimates your protein needs, and didn't look at people who were 50 plus. We've got to look at lifestyle cycles for protein needs.
Sure. Yeah.
It's bizarre.
It's really bad. And it's, in some ways it's getting worse because there was just recommendations published by the government saying that ultra-processed food is not bad for you.
Was that based on that? Was it Cornell? Did you see that study where they showed that a chicken thigh, they basically said Cocoa Puffs are better for you than a chicken thigh?
I saw that.
And a professor, I go, how could you put your name on this? Right. How could you do that? You're going to say that ground beef and chicken thighs, that Cocoa Puffs would be a better choice. Are we really that misinformed? Do you think that the American public really looked at that and went, because I look and I go, there's 2 things that could happen here. Someone go, oh, goody, I get to eat Cocoa Puffs.
Yes.
Which were my favorite growing up there with, Pop-Tarts. But, or it would be like, oh, come on, we're not, you think we really are going to fall for this.
Right. When I saw it, I was almost angered by that study that I didn't even want to give it the time to dive into it deeper to find out how they made an error because just the whole premise is ridiculous, right?
It's like you just hope people now are starting to see through all of this.
Yeah.
The little American Heart Association stamp of approval on a cereal box. It's like, come on.
Right under it is like the notice that this is mostly not real food.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing. Yeah. And, I think a lot of the wave of change is happening now because we're not getting our information solely from the government and from media, which are both fully funded by the food companies that are trying to just sell us food as much as possible. And so I think things like podcasts, social media, even though there's a lot of like religious controversy about what diet is the best, I feel like there's pretty much complete agreement that ultra-processed food needs to be eliminated.
Yes. And the thing is, people, I've seen this enough. We all do this. You write the diet for yourself. A diet is not a religion. There's some core foundational things, but as we've seen is I think that we need to look at diets very differently. There's a therapeutic use of a diet. Like, I think the carnivore diet can be an amazingly therapeutic tool.
Exactly.
You've got food intolerance, leaky gut. Wow, here's a simple way to like get rid of a bunch of the potential offenders and let yourself heal a bit and then go back and challenge. So there's therapeutic things that you can do that will help you identify what's the best long-term diet for you, because the best long-term diet, and that's going to change as you age, or maybe you've got health things going on. And so, it's like keto, vegan, paleo, like there's all these options out there.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. If you look at those diet interventions, you're going to find where you fall in what your body needs. And everyone needs to look at themselves as an N of one, right? Like your biology is going to be different than mine. Your gut bacteria are different than mine. Your activity level is going to be different than mine. Your hormones are different than mine. Your diet needs to be totally individualized for you, using those core principles that you mentioned earlier: protein first, vegetables. Eventually, everyone's going to need some vegetables eventually, right? There's vitamins in vegetables, there's fiber, you need that eventually. And some carnivore people might say never, but I don't
know. Aren't most of the carnivore people now coming back in?
I think they are.
They're like,
there's some.
And again, I see it as a great therapeutic tool, but not as a long-term tool. What's interesting to me right now is the protein debate and this idea that eating optimal protein, which I don't consider this to be high protein. I think 2 to 3 grams, which you've seen bodybuilders do for years.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're fine, right? So, but eating 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of target body weight, that's not a high protein diet. High protein would mean you're getting the majority of your calories from protein. You're not.
Right.
That's like 30% of your calories.
Right.
How does that high?
Yeah. No, that makes, the definition of a high protein diet is actually, for me, it's like 2 or 3 grams of protein, not 1 gram. But people have trouble even getting to 1 gram. And it's just...
That's because they're loading themselves with ultra-processed food.
Right.
That is, and you look at what happens when you eat ultra-processed food, where it actually has a lower thermic effect. So and it's significant, something like 500 calories lower a day if your diet's mainly processed foods. Like
thermic effect,
calories.
Just so people know, can you define that?
So when you look at metabolism, you've got your resting metabolic rate. That's how many calories you would burn if you just basically sat on the couch all day long. And that is the big mover to change your resting metabolic rate is your muscle mass, right? Now, thyroid and estrogen, testosterone will have some impact there too, but the big driver there is muscle mass. More muscle mass, better resting metabolic rate. Then you have 2 other things that you can do to change your metabolism. Number 1 is movement, activity, and exercise. And in fact, when you look at what's going to make the bigger difference overall every day to your metabolism beyond resting metabolic rate, it is really activity, not so much exercise. Exercise might be 5%, but it's how much you're moving all throughout the day can change your metabolism by hundreds, if not 1,000 calories. So getting up and moving all throughout the day. And then the other compartment is thermic effect of food. And so we have protein, fat, carbs, protein 20 to 30%, carbs 5 to 10%, fat basically 0.3. So when you look at these ultra-processed foods, they are high fat, high carb.
Right.
And so very low thermic effect. High carb, high fat, low satiety. So now you don't get that thermic effect and you're hungrier.
Right.
So you tend to eat more calories. I mean, what they've seen with people who have a high ultra-processed food diet is they tend to overeat and they don't have that thermic effect of food. So it's a double-edged sword, right?
Sure.
I was just in Spain and I was looking at, geeky, but I was looking at ultra-processed food consumption by country. And because I was so intrigued because I was looking around going, I'm not seeing anyone walking down the street. And when I go into the grocery store, you can find the ultra-processed food, but it's like back in a corner. And
grocery stores look completely different.
Totally
in Europe,
different.
Right?
Totally different. So, I mean, you can find it if you really want to, but it's not obvious.
Not front
and
and
prevalent.
center. Right?
No, and it turns out they eat like maybe 20, 25% of their calories from ultra-processed food. We have 70% here in the United States. 70%.
It's mind-blowing. So the United States is the highest of ultra-processed food per capita. Yeah, that's not surprising.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
We were in London and we were taking pictures at the grocery store because it was all refrigerated sections.
Yeah.
And again, there was like a back area that was
Right, with the chips and the
but I mean, it
cookies.
was very small.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I think as people make food choices, it's hard when you go to a supermarket because most of the supermarket, you're going down the aisles, is ultra-processed food. So you just got to stay on the outside of the supermarket for the most part.
Just order online.
Or order online.
Then you won't even get tempted.
That's a great
tip. Just order online. Then you have your things that you get all the time. And then it's simple and you don't mess up.
Yeah, that's another great
it's
way to
very
maintain
easy.
a
We
diet.
just have like our house, we have a freezer stocked with all of our meat and fish. And then I always have things like cauliflower rice pilaf so I can make simple stuff. And then we have our pantry with like olive oils and nuts and seeds and beans. And then we just get our fresh vegetables and fruit and little bits of yogurt and we're fine.
No.
Right? Easy.
Exactly. And people are like, what if I get hungry? Don't I need snacks? If you're snacking, you're not getting enough protein in. That's what I always say.
Look back and say, did I hit a hormonal winner at my last meal? Because if your meal was eat protein first, and it really should be protein, fat, fiber. Now, you're going to get some fat with the protein, but the fiber is all those non-starchy vegetables, maybe a little bit of fruit. I noticed when I'm working out, like my body will go, you need some carbs. But I always try to do berries are my go-to.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the berries in Europe taste like entirely different food. This whole idea that we transport our food all over the place is such a disaster.
So bad.
Like eat seasonal, eat local, eat organic, rotate your stuff.
If you look at the number of miles your food travels, it's just mind-blowing. It can't still be good, and it's probably still good because of the chemicals
I know.
put on the food.
Yeah,
That's
they
the only reason
preserved it.
why,
It's a nightmare.
Yeah, it is a nightmare.
Yeah. So, but protein, fat, fiber was going to improve your blood sugar balance and your satiety so you won't be hungry. If you were hungry in between meals, you boo-booed that.
Right.
Do better there. Like that night we went to the Brazilian steakhouse, I was like, I don't think I'm going to be hungry for days. Like I was just so full after eating that. I was like, oh, because you will be. Even if you eat like an 8-ounce serving of protein, you're full.
Absolutely.
Eat that and a bunch of veggies and you're good to go. And you're going to have that stability. And then have some water. Chill out. Right?
If you can drink mostly water and kind of eliminate almost every other beverage other than maybe tea and coffee in the morning or something, you're winning there too. I think all the beverages that are out there, whether they're in bottles or cans or whatever, try to stay away, right?
Yeah, this hotel we're staying at, I was pretty enthused that they actually have a water pitcher in the room and a purified water dispenser down the hall.
Oh.
I go, that is so cool that you were doing that.
Right.
I know one hotels do that as well. Yeah. So sparkling water, green tea. Yeah. I love coffee. So
and I think having a can of something here and there as a treat is great, but it should be a treat, not like a refrigerator stock full of Diet Coke, right?
Right. The whole artificial sweetener thing, I'm just not a fan. Yeah. But I am a big fan of allulose. I think allulose is like one of the most amazing things out there.
Yeah, it's incredible, the science behind allulose now. And I actually wasn't using sweetener in my coffee, but now I put allulose in my coffee every morning just because of the metabolic effects.
Right? Well. I know. I don't like sweet in my coffee. So I was like, how am I going to get this allulose in? Because I want to make sure I'm getting it in. Right. And for those who haven't heard of allulose, it's a rare sugar that basically doesn't get absorbed. It doesn't really have any calories, doesn't cause any GI distress, doesn't raise blood sugar or insulin, does raise GLP-1. Like, it's amazing.
Just all the good things.
Yeah. It's
a miracle compound.
It literally, I looked at it and went, I need to get this into my diet. Right. And that's what I've been trying to figure out is how do I get people to be able to get like 10 grams in of this a couple times a day, because this is fantastic for, insulin sensitivity, GLP-1.
Dr. Promo gave me my first box of allulose. And I've been just like a huge fan ever since then. Can we talk a little bit about supplements? I would love to hear your thoughts about what do you consider are crucial supplements for most people, and a little bit on the topic of like creatine powder.
My favorite supplement on the planet.
Mine too. I think
my gosh.
Creatine has risen to my number one supplement, actually. The more research I see on it.
It's fantastic, and you can feel it. So foundationally, I think we should all get our omega-3 index tested and see if you need omega-3s. Most people do. I think we should all have our vitamin D tested, and then likely you're going to need some D3 and K2. Magnesium is another one. So those are my foundational supplements. And then I like doing an organic acid test or something that you can look at and go, how else am I doing with my pathways? But that's where I start. Then the supplements that I love for aging. If I could go back in time, I would be taking creatine from the time I was a teenager. I will tell you, full disclosure, I used to train people down at Gold's Gym in Venice, and it was the bro thing.
You did, yeah.
And all the dudes took creatine. I was like, oh, you'll get big and bloated and blah, So it wasn't until a couple of years ago I started looking at this again and going, where have I been? Especially for women, when you look at women, we probably aren't getting the creatine we need from food, and cooking is going to destroy some of it. So it's in fish, it's in meat, but you really want to eat like tartare and sashimi. We have 70 to 80% less tissue stores of creatine. Creatine, first thing that's going to happen when you take creatine is that you will notice a difference in your exercise performance. The way that it helps you get stronger and build more muscle is because it helps you perform better, because it's the creatine, phosphocreatine, that we use for that quick, fast, bursting energy. But there's 5% of creatine actually in our brain. And if you don't have enough tissue stores in your muscles, you're not having it in your brain.
Right.
And so this is why we want to push it more. So I now do a foundational dose, and then I do an extra dose of time zone adjusting. Like I went from Florida to London, back to Florida to Boston to Spain to Lisbon, back to Florida to British Columbia.
Oh my gosh.
I looked at that, I went, this was a dumb plan, but it just was the way things worked out. And literally I would come back home and unpack, repack, and leave. So I was time zone changing like crazy. Yeah. I used to struggle going from California to Florida. Now I had no challenge with any of this. And the only difference is I used creatine to time zone adjust because I read the data on it for sleep deprivation. And it's amazing.
Interesting.
Zero challenges.
Really?
Yes.
I had no idea.
I know.
I want to see this study. I'm going to link to it in the show notes as well.
Yeah. So look at it for sleep deprivation. I was talking to a creatine researcher, and he's like, it's the jet lag formula. I'm like, oh my gosh.
That's amazing.
I'm shocked. Like
I've
literally
been using
shocked.
this app called Time Shifter for jet lag. It's been really good, but I never heard of creatine for that. So I'm going to do it.
This changes. I have tried everything that they say to do, and it was like, I'm just not good at this. Nope, now I am. There was a great study that came out for women, postmenopausal women, depression, where they found that this creatine was like, I think they were taking antidepressants, and the ones that took creatine to way better response. So it's important for brain fog, for cognition, for skin wrinkles.
Yeah.
I mean, like everything. So I think every single woman, especially 30 plus, should be on creatine.
Yeah.
Now, I am playing around with different forms of creatine right now.
Oh.
I know all the research is on monohydrate, and everyone says you should take monohydrate because monohydrate's all the research is on. I'm gonna go actually to this researcher and unpack all this. But from everything that I'm seeing right now, the reason that we tend to get some GI distress with creatine monohydrate or some bloating is it's not all absorbed. And the part that's not absorbed is giving us GI distress.
Got it.
And giving us that extracellular bloating. Now, one of the things that creatine does is it will pull more fluid into your muscles, which is fantastic. And that is why we have to do bioimpedance, so that women don't make themselves crazy. Right? Because if you went on creatine and your weight went up 2 pounds and it was because your total body water increased and you've got more fluid in your muscles, celebrate.
That's a good thing.
That's the greatest thing ever.
Right.
But if you've got GI distress and you just feel bloated, that's that creatine that is extracellular creating some problems.
Sure.
So I'm researching right now because I'm likely going to make a shift, and I've been doing it myself with an HCl form. And it's funny because all the word out there is, oh, it's just marketing and more expensive. It's actually cheaper because you need a much smaller dose.
Really?
Yeah.
It's the HCl form of creatine.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I've got all the
Look into that.
research now showing how it's absorbed, contrasting it, looking at all the different forms because there's a lot of different forms of creatine out there. But again, everyone's like, monohydrate's the most studied. It's like, well, but it's been around the longest. Doesn't necessarily mean like, okay, that sounds like so archaic. We've used rotary phones forever. We should just use those, I mean, it's like kind of crazy. So
That's a good point.
I'm playing with both right now. I still have monohydrate, but I've been messing with the HCl. Stay tuned. But the bigger takeaway is this is such a critical supplement. And if you are, as a woman, are afraid of gaining weight with this, what I tell women to do is just start with 1 gram if you're using monohydrate, and then go to 2 grams. And then go to 3 and dose it throughout the day.
That's how I tell.
And then and just make sure you're doing bioimpedance, but just see how you feel. So that's one. I also love. Are you taking Mitapure?
Yes.
Yeah, I used I like Mitapure. I've been on for over a year. Plus their skin stuff.
Yeah, I'm using their skin stuff too
Oh
now.
my gosh! But there's so few supplements that you can take and notice a difference. Caffeine you can take and go to the gym. You notice a difference. Creatine, you go to the gym, you notice a difference. And Timeline, you go to the gym, Mitapure, and you notice a difference. And I was like, I don't even want to say this, but looking at all the research with this, it really truly is like exercise in a bottle. So when I look at people, longevity focused, I think that the supplements that you definitely want to make sure you're doing is creatine, Mitapure, and then Qualia Senolytic is the other one. You take that one?
I haven't taken it for a while, but I do have a bottle of Qualia Senolytic.
But this is so easy. You just take two days a month.
I know. I need to, and that's what happens. I forget to take
Okay,
it those
so
2
here's
days a
how you
month.
do it. Because
What's the trick?
my husband's in charge of these things, but we just do it the first 2 days of the month.
Oh, that's a good, easy. There you go.
Right?
I got to get the bottle
Easy
out. First 2
peasy.
days.
Yes.
Send me a text reminding me.
Yes.
The first of
Now,
next month.
the other thing I've been playing around with, there's a company that's doing AI-generated peptides orally. And
I've seen this company.
Right?
Incredible. Yeah.
So there's a muscle one called PeptiStrong that I've been playing around with. And they also have a BPC oral. So we're playing around with those too.
Yeah. The oral BPC I found really helpful in fixing people's leaky gut, actually. It's been extremely helpful in that too. So you definitely
Oh, and
look
leaky
into
gut.
that.
So I also like essential amino acids. I go off to the gym in the morning with essential aminos, creatine, and electrolytes. And then I also take some extra collagen throughout the day. So
Wow.
that's my other one that I love.
Wow. That's a great, and all the ones I try to hit on too. The only one I would add to that is I take nicotinamide riboside as well.
Oh, I take Qualia's NAD+.
Got it.
So it's a trifecta
Yes.
that they actually looked at, and it raised NAD more than just doing or anything else. So that's why I'm taking that one.
Got it. Yeah.
Yes.
I like the True Niagen product because that NR, they've done some really good studies
So
about
this
how
has
that's
that
absorbed.
in there.
So they're
So it
using
has
the same
that,
NR.
and so
Got it. Yeah. I think there's like this new kind of thought process around supplements. I totally think there was a time where we were taking way too many with very little evidence and probably didn't do a lot. For
I
most
was
people.
doing that. I guilty
I
as
did that
charged.
too. Yeah,
I was
big
just like,
baggies of supplements,
right? and I've it's funny now because I don't even take a multi anymore.
Yeah.
I used to
stopped
have
taking
this
the multi,
big
too.
multi and then all the minerals. And I went, you know what? I'm looking at my like organic acids and
You don't
I
need
don't
them.
need all this.
And I found that too with many patients. It's that I test and I tested myself. I'm like, why am I taking all this?
Yeah.
So really tailoring the supplement protocol with the few key ones that you talk about that most people need. Like if you test most people, they need their omega index is off, their vitamin D is off. So most people will need those. And, it all depends on your environment at that moment too. Like if you're traveling a lot, you're not getting out in the sun a lot, then you're going to need some vitamin D. So
Well, and don't you find too, I mean, for most people, it's like your gut's wrecked.
Right.
So if we just fix your gut and your diet, I mean, ideally, we're getting the majority of these things from your diet.
absolutely.
That's the goal,
Yes.
right? So if you're not eating ultra-processed food and you fix your gut so it's not leaky, which is another reason I love collagen, then you're actually good.
And your enterocytes will be able to absorb all the vitamins they need because they're
Yes.
not fighting off toxic chemicals constantly. Absolutely. It all goes full circle. So awesome, JJ. This was like one of the best protocol talk I've had in a long time. I love all your protocols for exercise, for diet. You really simplify it. So thank you so much for doing that. I wanted to touch on one more thing. I know we've talked for a long time, but I really wanted to make sure I hit this with you was what should women be doing differently, especially around the menopause age? I think that's a question that a lot of people have.
So ideally, in your 30s, in your teens and 20s, you've put on muscle and you've gotten yourself very focused. You're in your 30s, you're optimizing your protein. But there's another piece to this that you want to make sure you're doing in your 30s and 40s, and that is that you are really building your stress tolerance. And that's why I love high-intensity interval training. Basically, you're training your nervous system to go hard and recover, right?
And when you say stress tolerance, you mean like life stress?
I want you to be like, so your body doesn't know if it's stress from getting married, getting divorced, getting physical stress. It is getting your body to be able to recover from stress. We're not going to be able to get rid of stress. If you look at the most successful people, they don't have less stress. They've just taught their body how to handle stress well. So you've put those things in place, whatever they are for you, meditation, breath work, tapping, whatever those things are that help you tolerate, recover, become very stress resilient. Because when you look at what happens as you start to head into menopause, it really comes down to how are your adrenals doing? You're going to be relying more on them. You've got to have great habits in place like sleep. And then you want to really pay attention to your body. I knew exactly when my thyroid dropped. Like I could tell. Went in and sure enough, I'd gone from a 1 TSH to a 2.2.
Wow.
Now, that's not for most people. They wouldn't go, you don't have a thyroid problem. I go, yes, I do. I mean, everything happened. Started to lose the outer third of my eyebrows. I'd always been someone who sweat all the time. Now I'm cold. Now I'm constipated. My hair's starting to get weird. So boom, I'm better, right? Yeah. So pay attention to that because that oftentimes is the first thing that goes. But then ideally you've done a good hormone panel in your 30s when you know what optimal looks like for you. And the minute you start to notice things, like for me, and Dr. Vonda Wright talks about that musculoskeletal menopause syndrome, I couldn't recover from my workouts. I was doing the same workout, couldn't recover, and then my gums started to bleed. And I went to my dentist, he goes, low estrogen. And so it really is becoming so aware, and that's where you can use things like your HRV, your temperature, and go, okay, things have shifted. Yeah. Because it's you want to start replacing those hormones as quickly as possible. Right. Like I was fortunate that all my friends were functional medicine doctors. Right. I mean, literally my 50th birthday party was Dr. Sarah Gottfried and Dr. Anna Kubeka. I love it. Right? And I started replacing the minute things started to shift. And then I was working with really good HRT docs who could help me work through symptoms because you can't test your labs all day long every day. Right. So a lot of it has to be based on symptoms.
Exactly. And there's such a great point because I think a few great points. One is if you're listening to this in your 20s and your 30s, get your hormone panel done.
Yeah.
Get a full
Find out
set
what
of
normal and ideal is
exactly.
now. When you're in ideal and normal.
Right. And also like when you are going through menopause, it's more impactful to listen to your body than even a hormone test sometimes because those fluctuate.
Well, it's a vacuum.
Wildly.
It's a one moment in time.
Right? Instead of the same time.
Yeah. And here's one other interesting, weird, crazy thing that happened. Last summer, we went to Seoul, Korea on our way to Bali, and we went to the Ginseng Museum. It is a, country-run museum. I didn't want to go. Ann Shippey. Yes. Dr. Ann Shippey insisted we go. So we go. We buy a year's supply of ginseng. It was like you go in there and they go, we have this 6-year black root ginseng. You can't get outside the country. We're like, okay. And the reason we bought it is because they told Tim it's going to help with erections. I'm like, okay, great. All right. Anyway, it did. Yeah. But here's what's crazy about it. 2 months later, we get our hormones tested, and we're both on HRT. And both of our doctors are like, you need to lower your doses. You need to lower your dose of thyroid, of estrogen. Now, I just had a hysterectomy. I had my hormones tested because I was like, now I probably need more, right? I had my ovaries out. No, less. Wow. He needed less testosterone. And I was sitting here going, what on earth has gone on? And I didn't put it together. Then I was at A4M and I was listening to a lecture by Chris Shade, and he was talking about hormone receptor sensitivity and adaptogens and ginseng. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So the other important thing here is to look at, I think that we use hormone replacement therapy, the lowest dose we need for the impact that we have. And so it's just like you wouldn't want to start driving up, taking exogenous insulin because you're insulin resistant. You'd fix the insulin resistance.
Exactly.
So, look at that too and go, could I be using some things to help support hormone receptor sensitivity?
Right. Makes total sense. I think, whenever I talk about hormone replacement therapy, which I'm a huge believer of for men and women, for andropause and menopause, it's always in combination with what are the natural things we can do to optimize your hormones as well. Because you're right. You want the lowest possible dose that gets you to where you need to be, right? And
Right.
And also where you need to be is different for each individual person. And like you said, if we had hormone panels on people when they were 30, we would know where they need to be. But you need to listen to your body if you don't have that hormone panel and treat for symptoms more than the number.
Yes. Because I'm someone who, I get pregnant and gain 12 pounds overnight. Progesterone makes me cry, break out, and gain weight. I get quickly insulin resistant from it. And so, but if you look at the common ideas out there, it's progesterone's OTC. It's like, go ahead, slather it on. I'm like, oh no, careful.
Right.
These are hormones.
Yeah, same with many hormones that are over the, what's another hormone that's over the counter?
DHEA.
DHEA, right. That's the same thing. Don't just buy it and start taking it. You have to
No.
get levels measured. Melatonin too.
Yeah.
That's a hormone, right? So, wow. JJ, this was incredible. Thank you so much. I know we went way over time. I really
Did we?
appreciate
I'm not even paying attention to the time.
That's when we have fun conversations.
In it to win it.
Yes, exactly. It's a fun conversation. You lose track of time all the time. So, last question. What are you most excited about coming up for you, JJ? What's going on?
I am more excited about the whole nutrition and fitness industry than I've ever been. I am super excited about this whole idea of powerful aging, that truly we can in our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, look at our buddy Mark Sisson. We can be in our best shape ever and living it full out.
Right.
And we have more information, more research, more tools. Right. So I'm really fired up about that. I've got my powerful aging book still to be named. I kind of know what it is, but I'm keeping it a secret. I'm launching a powerful aging method program. I'm launching powerful aging method coaches, working on a special women's creatine product. So I'm more excited now for all of this stuff than I think I've ever been.
I feel it too. It's palpable. The amount of science, good science that we have now, combined with people really getting it and being able to talk about it, I feel a palpable change in where the nutrition and fitness industry is going, and it's really exciting. I think hopefully the next generation will be so much better off than all the misinformation that we had in the past. So with that, I want to thank you again from the bottom of my heart for joining us. Where can people find you?
jjvirgin.com.
jjvirgin.com. Easy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.